Story number 1. The first night of the Whispering House. Sarah unlocked the door to the house at 1913 Granger Street at precisely 11:57 p.m. The hefty wooden door creaked open like a throat clearing in the dark as the key turned with a loud, metallic clack. The silence permeated the air, as if the home had been holding its breath for years and had finally let it out as soon as she stepped inside. With her flashlight in hand, Sarah entered. The wallpaper had yellowed and curled at the edges like burnt paper in the tiny corridor. Her every step reverberated strangely, too loudly for the little foyer. The sound of her boots tapping on the wood floor was accompanied by a sluggish, bare set of feet that seemed to be following her cadence from somewhere farther inside the home. She paused. The reverberation ceased. She could feel the chill in the air behind her. It is pressure cold, not breeze cold. As if there was something just behind her back. She did not look back. Rather, she stepped forward one more. Tap, tap, tap. A heartbeat later came the second sound. Sarah took a swallow. "Just settling wood," she said in a low voice. However, it had been 23 years since anyone had lived in the residence. Furthermore, wood did not settle in a perfect imitation of footsteps. She arrived at the staircase's base. It spiraled into the blackness above like a spinal column. The beam from her flashlight flickered once. Only once. She pointed it up at the roof. Nothing. No insects crawling over the glass, no exposed cables. One creaking step at a time, she ascended the stairs carefully. About halfway up, her arm's hair stood on end. The light was not working properly. It was dimming now, not flickering. As though the shadows surrounding her were ravenous rather than passive. She first heard the whisper when she arrived at the landing. It did not originate in a single location. It appeared out of nowhere. "Leave!" She was so faint that she thought it was all in her head. Then it returned, louder this time. "Go now, please." Sarah gripped the beam tighter. "No," she replied in a whisper. The murmur ceased. There were 3 bedrooms, a bathroom, and what the realtor referred to as a storage room, in the 5-door hallway upstairs. Sarah shone the flashlight inside each door as she opened it. Except for the 3rd bedroom, none of them were occupied. It seemed as though nobody had ever left inside. They made the bed. Not dusty, not elderly. Made. The sheets are clean. The pillows fluffed up. A low orange flame was burning from a candle on the nightstand. Sarah took a step back. The residence was without electricity. Since the disappearance of the Merrow family in 2002, nobody had visited. Nevertheless, the candle was still burning and the room appeared worn in. She noticed a form reflected in the glass when the flame abruptly flickered. Behind her stood a tall, motionless, dark figure. She whirled around. There is nothing there. The door automatically banged. The flashlight went out. The entire space was engulfed in darkness. Sarah took hold of the handle. It refused to move. Chilly metal. As cold. And then there was a knock. Not from the corridor. From beneath the bed. Knock, 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 knock. Something was beneath it. Like a child attempting to hold back cries. She could hear the weak sound of breath. She retreated till her knees struck the bed and yelled, "Who is there?" No response. Simply breathing. Fast. Wet. The voice, no longer a whisper, then came. Right in front of her, when nothing could be seen, was a child's voice. A void looking underneath. It is gazing back. Sarah stopped. Something reached out from under the bed. A skinny, pale hand with fingers that had too many joints. She let out a scream and sprang for the door once more, hitting it with both fists. The candle went out. The room fell silent. Not breathing. Not a sound. Nothing but blackness. The bed then began to squeak. She was not interested in finding out what was climbing out. Next to her ear was a quiet voice. "You are the person we have been anticipating." Without prompting, the door opened. Sarah ran and stumbled into the corridor. Under her feet, the floorboards bowed strangely, as if something beneath the floor were attempting to rise. She looked back. The door to the bedroom was ajar. However, it was no longer a bedroom. The corridor was incredibly long, perhaps endless, and lined with doors that had never been there before. One by one, the doors gently opened, exposing blackness behind them. And there was movement within that blackness. Sarah took off running. Down the steps. The foyer was different. The door had vanished. Now it is just a wall. Story number 2. Room 6 of The House That Sleeps. Olivia used a forceful twist of the crowbar to smash open the corroded lock on room 6. The door creaked as it gave way, and she was immediately struck by the smell. Stale, damp, and metallic, as if it had once been inhabited by something long since dead. With her boots crunching on a floor covered in glass and rubble, she entered. The windows were fastened from the inside and boarded up. Narrow, quivering beams of light were cast across the floor by the light that seeped through the fissures. Her cell rang. One signal bar. She switched the flashlight on and swept the room with it. Water-stained and blistered in spots. The walls were covered in thick, peeling wallpaper. It was an odd pattern, a floral design that seemed to shift the more she studied it. When the light was on the flowers for longer than a few seconds, they appeared to droop. An armoire stood in the room's corner. Tall, heavy. Its doors were open a little. She walked carefully toward it, her flashlight beam trembling with each step. She heard it as she grabbed for the doorknob. Something thumping inside. Not too loud. Not aggressive. Simply put, intentional. Thump. She hesitated. She held her breath. Listened. Then, a murmur. Don't. The armoire was not the source. It was behind her. She whirled around. The room is empty. Her gaze returned to the armoire. Now the doors were ajar. There was only blackness within, with no floor, no hangers, and no shelves. Darkness that never ends, hungry. And in the middle of that blackness, two eyes, unblinking and red. They remained still. However, they observed. Her flashlight died after flickering. Stumbling backward, she fumbled with her phone. For a brief moment, the screen illuminated, allowing her to notice that the armoire was no longer empty. Something was stepping out. Spindly, thin limbs. No human could imitate the angle at which the head was cocked. The long arms are dangling on the ground. Skin stretched over bone like dried paper. Its mouth parted, but not to let out a cry, to take a breath. It took long, languid, sucking breaths as if it had been depriving itself of air for years and was now relishing each molecule. Olivia spun around and took off running. From room 6, down the corridor. However, the hallway had become longer. As she fled, the walls were shifting and extending away from her. Her weight made the floorboards creak, and then mutter. In a whisper, yes. There were dozens of voices above the ceiling, behind the walls, and beneath her feet. In varying tones, they are all stating the same thing. Stay. There was a rattle in the doors on either side. One exploded, exposing a young infant seated in a chair. He sewed his mouth shut. His throat was dry with blood. He held up a hand, gestured behind her. She was unwilling to turn. However, she did. Now the armoire thing was crawling on the ceiling. Stop walking. Fast. Fluid. She shouted and rushed into a kitchen that was not hers through a door at the end of the hallway. The table was occupied by a family. Everybody is dead. Keep your eyes open. Gaping mouths. Heads cocked in precisely the same angle. As if they were posed by someone. They looked at her with their heads turned. Simultaneously, the mouth of one of them, possibly the father, opened. There was a dry creaking sound. You currently reside here. Then, with sudden deterioration rather than force, their heads burst. Unseen pressure caused skulls to shatter, hair to turn white, and flesh to peel back. She retreated into an alcove. The kitchen walls started to bleed. The joints where the tile and ceiling meet gushed black liquid. When it touched the floor, it sizzled and flowed down, leaving burn imprints. Now the thing was at the doorway of the kitchen. It did not approach. It smiled, and uttered, in the tone of her mother, Olivia, you left me behind. Then the kitchen lights exploded. It all went dark. She also sensed footsteps behind her in the dark. Not coming, circling, measured and slow. Layers and layers of overlapping whispers filled her ears, until she was only able to comprehend the sensation they gave her. This was not a haunted house. It had life. It was also awakening. Her wrist was gripped by something. A hand. Cold. Child-sized. She yelled and retreated, but her ankle was caught by another hand. Then another. And yet another. Dozens. From underneath the ground. From within the fortifications. Yelling at her. Attempting to entice her. She yelled, kicked, barely managed to break free, and ran through the next door. She staggered into a small stairway. Walls of stone. Not a light. And a crimson glow at the bottom. Similar to a furnace. Or a gaping mouth. She paused. Glanced back. Reaching around the doorframe were the hands. One of them gave a wave. Mocking. Olivia had no choice but to go up the stairs. It got warmer as you went down. Louder. That is, until she heard breathing once more. It was not behind her this time, though. It was down below. At the bottom, something was waiting. Story number 3. The Cellar Door House of Hollow Silence. As Marcus made his way down the last creaking steps into the Holloway Estate's basement, rain pounded the roof like fists. It has been over 30 years since the cellar was last uncovered. The scent of mildew and something more, something older, like damp earth mingled with decay, filled the sluggish air. His flashlight beam struck decaying beams and rusty pipelines. Sweating and chilly were the stone walls. With a metallic sigh, he located the breaker box on the distant wall and opened it. However, the cables were ripped off, as if someone had wanted to ensure that the house would never be lit again. He let out a sigh. He should not have arrived by himself. However, the task was too simple to refuse. Categorize the estate, take pictures of every room for the historical archive, and then leave. He was not informed about the cellar. He scanned the distant wall with his torch. At that moment, he noticed it. A door. Stone is not formed of metal or wood. A flawless rectangle without a handle or hinges that was carved into the wall. Only a tiny keyhole in the middle. It did not appear right. It was too sharp and pristine for the surrounding collapsing foundation. He took a step toward her. With each stride, the temperature dropped. The light wavered. Then he heard it. Tap. Through the stone door. No knock. Tap. As if your fingernail were on glass. Tap, tap, tap. He carelessly leaned in. Hello. Nothing. Next, from the opposite side. Marcus. His blood turned to ice. It was his mother's voice. 12 years dead. He took a step back. The stone door remained stationary. It failed to open. However, something had changed. It was now darker in the basement. A few steps ahead of him were hardly illuminated by the spotlight. The ceiling appeared lower and the walls closer. He turned to leave, and discovered that the stairs were missing. Now, the area behind him widened into darkness. The walls had moved. It is now a small passageway rather than a square basement. Returning to the stone entrance, he spun. It was exposed, and just inside it, something was standing. A man, tall, wearing a black outfit. Shadows covered his face. Marcus, however, could hear his breathing. Like a dying machine, the breaths were deep and raspy. The man stepped forward. Marcus's flashlight's light angled away from him. One more step. His face was now visible to Marcus, or what was supposed to be a face. It was empty. Features hardly showed through the flesh, which was pulled taut like molten wax. Where a nose should be, there is a deep dent. No lips, just a line that started to smile and tremble. Then, without opening its mouth, it said, I waited. Marcus took off running. Footsteps smacking on stone. shadows clinging to the corners of his vision as he walked down the long hallway. On either side came doors, tall, narrow, knobless doors. Muffled voices, chanting, sobbing, and prematurely halting laughter came from behind them. He rounded a bend and crashed into a mirror face first. He staggered back. It was more than merely a reflection. It was incorrect. When he didn't, his reflection grinned. When he didn't, blinked. Then he lifted a hand and touched the glass with it. Marcus was still standing. The mouth of the reflection opened. It was dark inside. No throat, not teeth, just a hummed, gaping emptiness. Then it started to force its way through. As the reflection emerged from the mirror, the glass distorted outward and cracked like ice. Marcus spun around and ran out the closest door. He had returned to the cellar. However, it was distinct. Now the walls became the color of flesh, pulsing, breathing. There were veins in the pipes that hung from the ceiling. The flashlight went out. He had no sight. Then from above, light. A yellow circle. In the ceiling is a trapdoor. Suddenly a ladder came down. He was not thinking. He ascended. Every rung was moist and warm. He sensed something ascending behind him as he ascended. Not quickly, but sure. He exploded through the opening onto a corridor at the top. However, it was not the one he recalled. The wallpaper was shifting, breathing. Too many voices, all at once, filled the air in a faint whisper. What about the wall portraits of the family? They watched him and blinked. One of them, a little girl with braided hair, grinned and parted her lips. A moth scuttled out. Then another. Then hundreds. Black wings filled the air as they exploded from the frames. Marcus yelled and swatted them away as he raced. As he turned, he bumped into someone in a corner. A female, chilly skin, eyes that are dead. His sister was the one who, as children, had perished in this house. She took hold of his hand. Like dry ice, her touch was scorching. You were meant to remain in the cellar. Give me up, Marcus muttered. You let the door open. You feed it now. And the house moaned behind him. There were cracks in the floor. Through the boards, something was rising. He attempted to pull away, but the house now held his hand.